What is waving and how would you define it?
Waving is a dance style from California, even though it has many connections to many other cultures in the world. It comes from the Oakland Boogaloo. It comes from popping as we know it. The late 70s, early 80s. So it's pretty old, but it's now having a huge influx of dancers. Bring this like a little bit one step ahead, right? One step higher. Not to say that before it was not so good. Definitely not. I think the quality is almost the same. Waving is a dance style that it's about looking like a wave from the ocean, a wave of lights, a wave of sound, a wave of kinetic energy, whatever. Waving is a dance style where you look like a wave.
What sets waving apart from other street dance styles?
I would say because it's not based around the idea of following a beat so much. It can be a little bit more, I would say, easy to get into because you don't need like strict rules to play with. I would say it's a little bit more meditative because it doesn't follow a really straight rule of beats like popping, like hip hop, like breaking. There's not a single basic or foundation in waving where you count time. And it's super important. When we talk about popping and we talk, let's say, about the Fresno movement or the slot, whatever you want to call it, it's always on the 1-2, right? And it's performed on the 1-2, and it should be on the 1-2. How you can change it, of course. But on waving, there's no such thing. So people get into waving feel they're more free because they don't have to follow the certain rules. And I will say that's what sets it apart. It's very meditative. It's very on your own pace, right? And I would say it's also very creative. The idea of a wave can be many things. And waving has always been a sub-style of popping, of like Oakland Boogaloo. So it was never really, there's no like very strict cultural rules about it, right? I would say that waving is different because it doesn't come from a competitive place. It comes from a place of culture, that's true. But at the same time, is not so cultural as other parts of the Boogaloo movement, right? The popping. So I would say that's what sets it apart. It's very meditative. It's very soft, if I might say. But of course, you can do it as however you want. I'm just saying that people find comfort in waving, and I think that's something that is really beautiful.
Yeah. When and how did waving first emerge?
Waving comes from the tidal wave move. The tidal wave move is a move that was performed around the area of Oakland, Northern California, the Bay Area. I will say the Bay Area because it's not only a single city. And it was performed as a big wave that looked kind of like very big movement. That's where it began, right, in Northern California. And it was performed to funk music by dance groups. But the beginnings of it can be a little bit more complex, right? Waving or the act of looking like a wave comes from many generations back, right? From many other cultures. Many cultures try to imitate water to bring rains, for example, right? Or a kind of like smooth liquid movement might look sexy in other cultures, not sexy, but like erotic, right? So you can find in the Middle East wavy movement. I will say wavy movement, right? It's this movement performed in kind of like a very fluid way that I would not consider waving because it looks like a wave, but it doesn't have the cultural background, right? I would say it dates as long as humans have lived in this earth, I would say, because like dancing for the rain, dancing in a more erotic way. You can see the Middle East, you can see the Pacific Islands also performing kind of a very fluid motion. You can also find in India many folkloric dances, and even some European and Africans also use this kind of movement. I would not say it's waving. I would say it's pre-origins, but I will say it doesn't have the cohesive cultural background.
Okay, can you name the most important elements of waving and explain how they helped create and develop this dance form?
I consider myself somebody who is... I know the roots of the culture. I never really cared about it that much because I always wanted to feel more free than being chain to a culture. Nowadays, I see it as a bit of both, right? I want to be free, but I like the culture, and I will say the culture also sets me free, and the culture is what taught me how to wave. Right? Without the culture, without the dancers that came before me, I would not be doing waving. That is important. So when I speak about waving, I always have this little bit of a more openness than the people who is, for example, from California, from Northern California or LA. I would say the basic foundation of the waving is the isolation. I will say it's isolate in succession. You isolate your fingers, you isolate your wrist, you isolate your elbow, and that creates, if you perform it in a logic way like one after the other one, that looks like a wave. A wave is, I will define a wave as a energy or information transfer from point A to point B in a body. So I would say that's the most basic thing is you move one thing and then the other thing and then the other thing. And because you do it in succession and you do it in a kind of like a motion where you're like letting go of that, just not like very mechanically, but like try to do it softer, that it's where the visual effect appears. Waving is just visual effects. Mm-hmm. Some people think that you have to, like do that with a hand and like do it in a succession, but honestly, as long as you move in succession, it looks like a wave, right? The more control you have about these isolations, of course, the more you will be able to change its texture and its form. But I would say the most important thing about waving is the isolation and the control of it.
Okay, which dances have predominantly influenced the style and why?
There are many names that influenced, but I would say the most influential dancer performed waving and that was well known might be Michael Jackson. I would say that's on a world scale, right? Because his teacher was Poppin Taco. Poppin Taco was a popper that was very known for his waves. Back in the days, the style of waving was not really considered that much like a style. It was just like moves, right? That looked really good. Just like the robot was not really considered like robot style. So I would say the most influential dancer that performed waves was Poppin Taco back in the days. Because he was in contact with Michael Jackson. And I think we all seen Michael Jackson perform a wave or two, a cobra, right? I think we all saw the magic from popping and waving into Michael Jackson. And I would say, if I have to say the most influential of all, I would say without a doubt that it's Michael Jackson. Okay. Thanks to, of course, the poppers from California who helped him, right, develop this thing. I don't think he's considered himself a waver. I don't think even Taco considered himself a waver, right? Mm-hmm. Because back in the days, there was not such thing. You were a popper and that's it. A street dancer, whatever. But I would say it's either Michael Jackson or Poppin Taco. However, when it comes to the culture and in a more focused way on, well, I am a waver and I want to learn waving, where should I look? I would say one of the most influential is still Poppin Taco. There are many other names like Daryl Stokes, also from California, OG Boardman. You got Slick Dog, Jay Smooth in a more newer generation, right? And then what I can say about Asia would be probably Poppin Zero. Poppin Zero, I know him for his waving for a long time. And when it comes to Europe, I would say it's Bishop. Mm-hmm. Bishop from France. As other continents, country, I don't really know. But yeah, those are the names I would say make sense for me. Yeah.
What events or countries influenced the style and why?
There has been some events that have tried to do waving only because back in the days it was not really known waving for being a style, right? Rather than just a move. The first waving event I went to, it was not a waving event, it was a popping event, but they had waving category. It was in France. It was in Paris. That's where I met Bishop, and that's where Jay Smooth was judging waving. That was the first event I went to where waving was considered as a style. It was 2014 around. But I know in the USA there has been many other popping events that had waving category. However, lately and since the pandemic has been a exponential growth on this. The influx of dancers has been crazy. And some dance events are only focused on waving started to appear. I would say, because of course my crew is are the ones that are doing this. I would say the waves within right now might be the most important because well it's in the US, the cultural background is there, and I think my crew is doing a really good job of spreading waving in a very neutral way, not too conservative, not too open about it where everything is lost to art, right? Not like linked to culture. So I would say within is a good is a good event to say, well, this is changing things. Waves Within started on the online world since the pandemic, and this is what I think pushed people to upload videos only doing waving, competitions of only waving, and then some other events appeared in Europe. It's true that Back to the Future in Russia had waving, but it was not a waving event. But there has been some waving events, and I would say mostly after the pandemic, because of the rapid growth that we have experienced in the dance style when it comes to like people coming in, right? I would say especially Germany, especially Germany. Volt, Ease, Rocío are the ones that are managing mostly in Europe. But I would say it's Wave Within what kickstarted like, okay, waving videos and waving events and waving blah, and only focus on waving without having to do popping, without having to being judged by a popper who does waves rather, like wavers, judging wavers. I would say Waves Within is probably the most important of all, but there has been other. I would say it hasn't been the spark of it all. I would say the spark of it all kind of was Waves Within in the pandemic. In Greece, I would say Alex is doing great. Russia, I have some friends that are willing to do waving events too. There are some events that try to do waving in China, Japan, Korea. They're not so known. Maybe they're not so known for me because they're very far. But I would say mostly USA and Germany.
Okay.
I would say those two.
What are the main elements of waving? Is there in foundation?
I would say the tidal wave is what started it all. And I would say the foundation of waving as a whole is the isolation. So I would like to elaborate on that, but I think I will be like lying to myself. Things are way more simple for me than maybe for somebody else. So I would say that's the only basic. For example, let's say when people ask me like what is the most important movements in popping, I would say it's just the pop, right? And then you can do whatever you want. Of course, there's more foundational moves. Of course, we have the arm wave. Of course, we have snaking. Of course, we have cobra. Even if you don't want to consider it waving, it's still kind of fluid movement. But I will say the beginning of it all has to be, for sure, the tidal wave. The isolation is what makes it work. It has kind of like spread and evolves into also like liquid dancers kind of perform also very fluid motion, and that is not coming from the tidal wave per se. But I would say without the tidal wave, without the isolation, there will be no waving. So what movement is more important than right that I think that's the beginning of it all.
When exactly is it considered a waving style or just a technique borrowed from waving?
I would say it's considered waving style when you perform several waves in continuous succession.
Yeah. Dope. Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Is there a particular type of music that people tend to play while waving?
Ooh. Well, lately I've seen that people get down to more softer music, more chilled and relaxed beats, because of course they don't have to commit to the rhythm. So it can even have no beats, no no snares and blah blah. I would say the most normal music to dance waving nowadays would be kind of like a lo-fi kind of energy, hip hop ish kind of beats, more experimental electronic music. For one, I like to dance waving to techno music, electronic music, drum and bass. There's a lot of wavers doing drum and bass in the USA, especially liquid dancers too. Dancing to jungle music, dancing to very different. I would say there are many music genres that wavers feel comfortable dancing to. To name a few, I would say first of all is the funk. You can dance waving to funk music, even though nowadays is not so famous for that. Then you got R&B. you got just straight hip hop beats with a electronic. I don't know how to define the music that we're listening to today, because I would say it's a mix of a lot of genres that just makes sense for waving, just because it feels more chilled and is not so heavily focused on the snare like funk music is, right? On the one, I think that the lack of a hardcore structure like the funk proposes is what people is, like being more comfortable around. So I would say, if I have to define it, I would say experimental hip hop.
What made you decide to dive deep into waving?
I had no other choice. I never thought about it, honestly. I never decided to dive deep into waving. I never decided to do so. It was very organic. I always felt attracted to waving. When I started doing popping, when I knew about popping style, the first move that I saw was a wave. So since the beginning, the first move that I tried in school, in the clubs when I was a legal teenager going to clubs, I would say that's an arm wave. That's the arm wave. I never really decided when. I've always been a waver. If you ask me, always been a waver. Even I didn't know it. I think it's also heavily related to other passions that I have. I love computer-generated graphics. I love video games. I love things that move and react to other things. And I think that's also a cool definition for waving, just like reacting in a domino effect, doing a wave. And also, I live in Alicante, in Elche Alicante, and it's literally 2 minutes to the sea. So since I was really young, I've always been fascinated and afraid of the sea. So I think that all kind of like makes sense for me. And the first thing that I enjoyed was the effect of the wave. And it's always been like that. When did I decided to dive deeper? Letting moves and like starting to do a more, exploration of it. I would say that was in 2013, maybe, after watching a video from Bishop. That was when I was like, all right, this thing can go way deeper than I thought. I would say what affected me the most, and the moment I was like, okay, this can go beyond what I thought, it was when I watched Bishop. And that was around 2013. I think.
What gets you inspired? Is this the music, the feelings, or the experience?
I would say it depends on the day. Sometimes I just hear some kind of music and I'm like, I wanna dance to this. I wanna do waves to this. And some other times I'm watching something interesting on my computer or on my TV. And I try to imitate how it looks with my hands and how to bring it to the rest of my body. So it's a bit of both. It's the music and then it's the outside world. One very influential and always be influential thing for me will be water and the sea, again, because I live right in front of it. I'm always inspired to move when I check those things, when I see those things, for sure. Nowadays, of course, I can also get inspired just by the sake of improving. And I'm like, you know what? I really I want to get better at waving. So I just like start waving and my inspiration comes from within. But most of the times it's an outside inspiration.
Do you have any tips for those who just started learning waving?
I would say the same tips as any other dance style is take your time. This takes a long time. Practice every day, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's 10 minutes. Practice every day. Don't let it go for more than, I would say, 2-3 days where you kind of like lose connection to it. Try to do it every day, even if it's just a little bit. I would say that's my advice. Maybe that's my advice because I'm getting older. My advice 10 years ago will be practice 8 hours a day. However, nowadays I'm not so young. And that would be the thing that I would say today. Advice, practice every day, even if it's 10 minutes, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's while cooking, even if it's while you do anything else. And be aware that there has been many other dancers doing it before. Most of us didn't invent anything. We just like put it together in a different way. And that what makes it look unique. But know that this dance style has been happening for a long time. It is connected to a root. If you don't want to, you don't have to connect it. You can be free with waving. But if you want to bring it to a cultural plays like events, battles, ciphers, whatever, I would say just be conscious about the information that has been connecting from the beginning to where you are at now. I would say yeah, and of course try to find yourself. But I mean, that is something that I will say to everybody in every second is like just be yourself. So I don't think it is that important. I mean, yeah, yes, it is completely important. But I would say that's nothing that I will say, as an advice. Like, be yourself. I don't think that helps the dancer. You will find yourself in time, but you cannot find yourself just by thoughts. You have to move. You have to put into the physical world your ideas in order to clear your ideas. Yeah, that's what I will say. Don't get so into your mind and dance it, and you will find the responses and the answers while moving. I think that's what makes us dancers.
Is there anything else you want to say about waving that we didn't mention before?
I would say I have one more thing to say is that I hope this dance styles brings happiness where popping could not bring it because of politics, because of OGs saying what is not. I would like the world to avoid the same mistakes that we have been doing for the last 40 years in this culture. And my only last words is do not step in the same rock 3 times or 20 times. Yeah. Let people be free. Know that waving will not cease to exist. And if it someday cease to exist is because it has transformed into something else that people need more. And I would say waving, even though it was there before me, I think it's there to serve me, to serve people find answers to their questions. So I would say for the people, do not be afraid to step out of the box. Do not be afraid to change things. Do not be afraid to destroy conventions. Dance was made for this. Be very conscious about where it comes from. I think waving is there to serve us. Is there to give us something. Yeah. We don't have to give to the culture so much. We have to take from the culture, give respect to the culture, of course, but the culture is there for us, not us for the culture. Mm-hmm. That's it?
Yeah.
Nice, okay.
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.